Hello and thanks for visiting our website, rebuilderinAbox.com. Today we're going to learn how to rebuild the nip and denso gear reduction. Later years shortened to the word denso gear reduction. Here we have two different styles with two different styles of hookup. The battery post and the variable parts that you'll see on these is where the ignition trigger wire comes in. Sometimes there'll be a weather-tight pin connector. Sometimes there'll be a post with extensions going around the side or around the back. Sometimes it's a quarter-inch spade connector. But they're basically function all the same, and the rebuild process is basically all the same. This is the motor here and here. This is where the armature and fields are. And on this side over here and here is where the solenoid assembly is. These are popular on Honda, Toyota, and Chrysler products. These two Chrysler products here, two of the most popular ones. This is the 8-cylinder Dodge Ram pickup, and this is the Chrysler minivan with the 3.3 or the 3.8, which is recognizable by the lineup pin. There are several places on the net that show you how to replace the contacts, which is the most common failure point in these. We don't necessarily frown upon that, but we're going to show you how to rebuild the whole thing. So the tools you're going to need either a 12 or 13 millimeter wrench to take that nut off. These three screws here are 7 millimeter. The two bolts holding the nose piece on are 9 millimeter. Probably have to get a deep well or an extension to go with that. And then these two bolts here will be 8 millimeter or 5/16. So you're going to need a 7, 8, and 9 millimeter, and then a wrench for this right here. Most of them are 12 or 13. Let's begin by taking the motor lead off. Just leave the boot on there. Then you'll see the two Phillips heads up in the top, here and here. Take those out. And then take these three solenoid cap bolts out. Those are 7 millimeter. Then we're going to take the cap off. Then there's a gasket under there which is normally reusable. Pull the plunger assembly out, and with it comes the spring. And just lay those aside. Then we're going to take our 8 millimeter or 5/16 and take the two long through bolts out. Then we can just tap the back lid off. Now what we're going to do is hold on to the round part. Take that off as an assembly. The armature comes right out. Now looking Looking down into the drive end housing, you'll see the two 9mm head bolts down in there. Take those out next. Now you might want to do this next step on a newspaper or on a clean tabletop, so that if parts tend to fall out, you don't lose anything. If you hold it like this and tap down, you're holding on the solenoid and tapping down on the nose cone. You can get it apart pretty easily. And what this is, there's 5 rollers in here and then a ball down inside this hole. There you can see the ball. And there's an outer gear. And there's the 5 rollers. And the plastic cage that keeps them. Then the Bendix itself comes out, and we're finished tearing it apart. Okay, let's just do a quick parts inventory, and I'll explain to you what has to be done to each part so we can put it back together. The cap, wash everything all up. Take a piece of sandpaper and sand these 2 contact areas here, then put a thin layer of white lithium grease on it. The solenoid cap, wash it up, put a thin layer of white lithium grease up inside the hole. The housing, brush holder assembly, the brushes, if they're look like that or close to that, they'll be fine. Wash everything up. You can spray the inside of the housing with a either dielectric paint or some sort of flat paint. Make sure that the brushes have nice, smooth travel on them. Take your finger and work them in and out. Make sure that everything is not getting jammed up, there's no rust or corrosion. You can spray a little bit of WD-40 on the back end of these. Solenoid housing, we have to put new contacts in it. We'll show you how to do that. The plunger assembly, we're going to give you a new one of those, so you don't really have to do anything to this. You can usually buff these off and sometimes get away with using them over. The nose cone, not really going to go too far into depth with doing anything with that. You could take a piece of sandpaper and clean up where the bolts go through so that you know you get a good ground. Wash everything off. The Bendix has a bearing here and under here. Put some oil in it and repack as much grease as you can down into the bearing. And then the rest of the parts, the gear and the rollers and the ball and the spring and the bolts, just clean those up. The armature, take some Scotch-Brite, clean up the copper commutator. There's a neoprene cover on the rear bearing. Pick it off, put a couple drops of oil in there, put a little bit of white lithium grease, and then put the neoprene cover back on. This bearing doesn't have a cover, put a couple drops of oil in it. The brush holder, right where the 2 screws go down in, take a piece of sandpaper,